picture. But it's interesting as you do walk down the pathway. I did hit a spot where my stomach lurched. So that was about halfway, I think, before we hit the guardian tree. And then definitely when we're walking up to the rune, there was a dramatic, okay, there's a non-neutral energy, so to say. I felt something very strong around the doorway even. So to me, it kind of felt like there was something palpably wrong that came to this house. And then tried to and then automatically I was pulled right to the back, right, which I believe used to be cold storage, and I wish I didn't know that. So, of course, I'm not certain yet, but I felt running, people in the household that were running, there's a panic. I did get an imprint of fire. I think there are a couple of layers of history here. So, I mean, we wait for confirmation with Marianne and the rest of the students, but I did feel an imprint of fire. I also did feel, and this again.
Yeah, cool.
Again, that pathway that leads to the back, I don't know why, but I felt that bodies had been stored there. There's something else that happened on this property that I'm still trying to go deeper into, but I can almost feel them carrying them along that pathway and keeping them in cold storage for whatever the reason is. So it's turned out to be, I haven't felt any sort of spirit energy come sidle up to me yet, so I haven't felt anybody specific, although I did get images of a female, potentially the lady of the house, long skirt. And again, this is something I'd still like to go into a little bit deeper. So not so bad for a sunny day trip. We'll walk in the park.
Historical and sometimes even ancient. The thing about the Hermitage ruins is that the woods around it are really alive, okay? And of course we know we have live plants, but that's not what I'm talking about. There are spirits in the land here that feel very protective of this space, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's what a lot of people report, feeling like, you know, sort of like things are watching you from outside the perimeter of this actual dwelling, because you can feel it really intensely here. But it's almost like they could be misperceived, because it doesn't feel like they're mischievous or that they are those spirits of the land which occupy lots of places. It doesn't feel like they are malevolent in any way. They just feel protective. And I feel like that presence is much stronger in this location than historical imprints of people that used to live here relatively recently. Let's talk in the last 100 or 200 years. These ancient spirits are much more powerful here than anything that's ever gone on here. I was able to tune into the young male spirit who actually does feel mischievous. And the way he presented to me was pretty fascinating. He actually looked like, similar to Daniel, our guide who's here, the way he was dressed. He had a sort of top hat and a vest on, and he came right over to my face, really, really strongly, with eyes really, really big looking at me. Also in an attempt to throw me off balance, but of course it didn't work. But I understand that he's actually lived here at some point, lived in this location. Maybe we can do some research to find out, but he feels like a younger guy. Maybe he had to do with horses, or like maybe fixing wagons, or I'm looking at wheels and he's somehow associated with a vehicle that way. But it's not a car, so it predates that. It's like a horse wagon. So I'm gonna have some more dialogue with him to see what his story is, but he is definitely here and a pretty strong presence at that. This is the spot that Daniel was talking about where a woman was taking a picture and a black shadow started forming in the background. Oh, wow. Yeah. Whoa, did you just hear that? I really hope that that was on camera. Holy cow. There was just a really like gnarly noise that came from back there. Ooh, yes. Oh gosh, yes. Oh. Ooh. Oh. Oh, my whole body is in goosebumps right now. Oh gosh, okay. Oh, gross. Oh, yes. It's got a super, super low energy here. There's all kinds of...
You can feel it?
Just low vibrational energy and things back here. And this is a really good spot for them to kind of get away from the daylight. And I think it's interesting that it's actually really quite dark back there. I wouldn't be surprised at all that if taking a picture through this frame, something starts coming in from this side, because it's actually there right now.
Are you doing selfies? Oh, sorry. I thought it was like we're taking pictures of the window.
I was just explaining, when I encounter like very, very low energy, I often feel like I have to throw up, and I have in the past. And so I haven't had that level of low energy anywhere here until that corner back there. And I understand it's not a single source. There are a number of things happening back there. But I think that it's interesting that they said they were drawn to tell the story on their ghost tours in this location. And I think that there's a reason for that beyond what they think the reason is, because it's a nice landscape. But it's really like, there's an alignment of energy, these low energy ghost story tales, and there are things back there.
Yeah, definitely.
And I can't really describe it beyond things currently, but it's a real big gathering in that spot, and it's very low. It's like, it's even like serpent-like, but not in a power way. In a sort of, I don't like to use the word negative or positive, but I would say like very, very, very low, like the lowest that it's going to come while something is still animated.
I get this, that sense, I get it back again. The dizzy, off-balance feeling.
Yeah.
I'm getting that back again in this area.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was feeling more throat close, like in my throat. I thought I was getting it from the fire, but now I understand, because it was back here that I was picking it up.
Yeah.
That it was more of a throat thing.
Yeah. I was just recently working on a location doing a clearing just further to what you're experiencing, PJ.
Yeah.
And there was a very low vibration grounded spirit there, and also other just like not great phenomena happening, not good people energy either. But as soon as I ran into him, because we actually ran into each other. Often when I visit homes, they try to vacate or hide, right? It's like he had no idea that I was coming until I was there, and we ran into each other. And my first physical response to encountering him was literally feeling like I was off balance and dizzy, and also a little bit nauseous. And that's often an indication, not just sometimes of off kilter energy, but often lower energy. That's how we respond to it.
Yeah, it makes you feel nauseous, and like I said, it was the first place that I felt like I got pulled into. And Marianne's 100% correct in saying that too, with the pathway, the flow of the pathway, everything ends up right here, so that's logical too.
And that's when malevolent things may not happen to you, but I guess it would happen to you, some of the shows I've watched, because they're depressed and they're more vulnerable for things to attach themselves to them. That's what I've learned.
We have gaps in our auric field, so our energy field that surrounds us, right? And the things that create that gap can be our states of mind. It can be things that we believe in, things that we're afraid of. There can be all kinds of things, including even physical injury to the body. So when we have vacancies within the aura, that's where things attach to, right? And so when we come to do investigative work, there's a reason that we say we need to bolster from the inside out, because we need to fill our gaps, fill our holes in our auric field, so that there's no compatible space for a lower energy entity or ghost or ungrounded spirit, or grounded spirit, whatever this is, to attach to you. Yeah. And then it's also why we need to deal with fear bodies, because fear bodies occupy space in your aura. And that's why before you come out to do this workshop, we do the in-class portion, right? So we can talk about things that you're afraid of and why there are reasons not to be afraid. And in actual fact, why maybe sometimes there are reasons to be afraid, not because you can be physically impacted, but your energy can be impacted. And if your energy is impacted, that can affect your life, and that can have a negative effect on you. And so we deal with the fear bodies by replacing fear with education. Okay, and the education and your understanding of your own inherent power and potential and skill building to produce that on demand makes you a good psychic investigator, because you're not apt to take things home with you. Yeah. Cool.
I have a question.
Yep.
When's class number 2?
So class number 2 of this work is doing spirit releasement or clearing. But sometimes when you are either removing something from a space, because detaching something from a place or a person doesn't necessarily mean you're transmuting it. Sometimes you're just detaching and removing from the space, and then it goes and occupies some other space, right? So when you're sort of up against really low energy like that, they often, have a response to that, and it sometimes isn't mild. Right? And it can be it can be physically draining, it can be frightening, there can be all kinds of interesting imagery involved. They can touch you and you'll feel things that could be frightening. Like when I leaned over the window there, it felt like someone was trying to stick a dull stick into my neck. So things like that can happen all the time. And so that's the part 2 of psychic investigating, is now you know the lay of the land. Now what do we do to improve the situation, either for someone who lives in that space or works in it, or if we feel like, the land is asking for help, then can we offer that assistance? So the idea here is you do more of this practice in your own spaces, like at home, friends that might say, hey, check this out, or go investigating on a day like today, get familiar with the investigation factor, and then you go into the making a difference or making a change in the location.
The Rogers TV viewer response line. Email us or connect with us on social media.
Alexander the Great!
I'm going to stay champion for a long time.
Brian Ortega!
Volkanovski, you ready or not? I'm coming.
Valentina Shevchenko, the cold-blooded assassin.
She's a killer.
Lauren Murphy, second longest active winning streak in the division.
Nick Diaz has some of the best boxing in MMA and world-class jiu-jitsu.
Ruthless Robbie Lawler.
He wants to take your head off.
Welcome to the war.
This is Rogers TV, Dufferin-Caledon. The opinions expressed in the following programs are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Rogers nor Rogers TV.
The Rogers TV 2021 federal election night coverage. I'm your host, Bruce Walkinshaw. I'm a local business owner and a political activist. Please let me introduce you to our election night panelists. Alethea O'Hara Stevenson is the founder and president of the Dufferin County Canadian Black Association and she is the host of In Conversation with Alethea on Rogers TV. Alethea at my end, and then Cheryl Connors is the Executive Director of the Canadian Network for Respiratory Care. These panelists are articulate, intelligent, and politically astute. They're ready to help us report and interpret tonight's election results. There's 2 ridings that are within this Rogers TV viewing area. First is the riding of Dufferin-Caledon, consisting of the town of Caledon and Dufferin County. Secondly is the riding of Wellington-Halton Hills, which encompasses Erin within our viewing area. And we'll be providing you with the results as they come in for both ridings as well as the national results. So let's get a sense from our panelists of what they think is going to happen tonight, both locally and nationally. Alethea, please, who do you think is going to win in this riding?
Wow, that's a really good question to start off the night. I think in this riding, it's going to be a tight race. I think it's going to be Kyle Seebeck again. As much as Lisa has run a strong campaign, I think the numbers will count, and I think it will go to Kyle again.
Okay, great. And Cheryl?
Yeah, I'm going to go with my same choice as last time. I think Kyle I don't think it's even going to be as close. I think Kyle's going to have a pretty easy path to victory tonight.
I basically have to agree with the 2 of you. The PPC candidate in this riding may generate enough votes to siphon some votes off from Mr. Seebeck. And if that ends up happening, we could have a really tight result, but I'm agreeing with the 2 of you. So, Alethea, nationally, what do you think is going to happen?
Nationally, it's going to be another close race, and I think the Liberals are going to take the win again, and it's going to be another minority government. So that's my prediction, and we'll see.
Okay, and Cheryl?
Yeah, this is a tough one because I think this could be a night where we could see some surprises and the pollsters could be wrong, but I think that the Liberals will squeak out another minority, but I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility that we could see an upset tonight.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. And I'm thinking that the Liberals are going to win another minority government. Based on what I'm seeing in the polling, both Liberals and Conservatives are going to actually, I think, end up status quo, with the NDP gaining some seats and the Bloc losing some seats. So we're going to have to, watch and wait as the election night unfolds. So what we're going to do now is we're going to introduce the candidates for the 2 ridings. So Cheryl, if you could please introduce the candidates for the riding of Dufferin-Caledon.
Absolutely. Well, the incumbent is Kyle Seebeck from the Conservative Party. For the Green Party, we have a new candidate, Jenny LaForester. Independent candidate is Stephen McKendrick. For the Liberals is Orangeville Councillor Lisa Post. New Democrat candidate, someone we don't know because we don't think she really ran a campaign here, is Samantha Sanchez. And the PPC candidate, Anthony Zambito.
Okay, terrific. And Alethea, who are the candidates for Wellington-Halton Hills, please?
For Wellington-Halton Hills, we have the incumbent Michael Chang, and we have the PPC candidate Sylvain Carl. We have a new candidate running as well, Noor Jahangir for the NDP, Melanie Lang for the Liberal Party, and Ranju for the Green Party.
Okay, and Melanie's a new candidate for the Liberal Party this time, as Lisa is for the Liberals, and the NDP have new candidates as well, as do the Green Party. So yes. It's only the incumbents that have stayed the same. And so I took the opportunity to do a little deep dive into Dufferin-Caledon. And Dufferin-Caledon, for the last many elections, has been a solidly conservative riding. And we'll talk about some of the demographic changes in a little bit. We've had 2015, we had Ed Cruson that came the closest of turning the riding red. and then Michelle Fisher, and now Lisa Post. So, and then in Wellington, Halton Hills, that riding has been conservative for a long, long time, and Michael Chong has been the member for the majority of that time. So, you know, this is very much, if you will, an incumbents election, and there's to lose if that's going to happen. In terms of where the parties are sitting as of today, I checked with the Toronto Stars, the Signal, and with the CBC poll tracker, and both of them are showing potential results pretty much very similar to what we had in the 2019 election. So they're projecting that the Liberals, who won 157 seats in 2019, are going to end up with around 155 this time. So it could be a drop of potentially 2. The Conservatives had 121 seats in 2019, and they're projected to be somewhere 119 to 122. So again, roughly the status quo. The apparent big winner for tonight very likely might be the New Democratic Party. They had 24 seats in 2019, and right now they're projected to do 35. So that's a big jump for them. The Bloc Québécois had 32 seats in 2019, and they're projected to drop down to 23 tonight. The Green Party is projected to go from 3 seats to 2 seats, or 1 seat, depending on which poll you look at. And the People's Party at the moment is projected to have 1 seat. And following the People's Party, Maxime Bernier, the leader of the People's Party, spent the last, I think it was 3 days in Alberta, feeling so optimistic that the PPC might be able to turn some of those really Tory conservative blue ridings purple for PPC, and was campaigning there more than he was campaigning in his own riding of Beauce in Quebec. So, and last numbers I saw on 338 Canada was that Beauce was a toss-up between the PPC and the Conservatives. So that's going to be a really interesting race to watch.
338 Canada's last final update did not show the PPC winning that riding. So they have Liberals at 148, Conservatives at 125, the Bloc at 32, NDP at 31, and 2 for the Green. So
when did you generate? Is that right now? I did those numbers earlier this morning.
Yeah,
so
this was.
You know what's amazing about this election is how much things are changing almost on an hourly basis.
Yeah, that was their final update. So.
Yeah. Yep. So you know we're looking at a really, really tight race all the way across the board, and we've already got some results coming in from Atlantic Canada that show the Liberals with a strong lead at the moment. We'll have to follow that as the night goes on, and the results are put up on our board, and we can see that. So we're going to be interviewing a number of people as the night goes on. Hopefully we're going to be able to plug into the majority of the candidates for the 2 ridings and have an on-air conversation with them and ask them some questions, and see how they feel about how the election went and how they did. So we'll be okay to do that as the evening progresses, and we had a number of items that we can talk about. So let's just dig into some of those things. One of the big issues in the campaign has been, about the actual calling of the election. What's your feeling about that?
So that's a really good question because, from the Prime Minister's perspective, I think he took a gamble. He did a number of initiatives this year. When I think about the CERB payments, when I think about the pandemic and where we are right now, when he called the election, we were at a fairly stable stage with the pandemic, so I think
Thanks.
you really took a gamble on calling the election. We'll see how the numbers turn out tonight, but we definitely could have waited. However, here we are with election tonight, so.
Okay, Cheryl?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, 80% of Canadians said they did not want a pandemic election. And hopefully, if the Trudeau government does manage to get another minority government, they'll learn that they are out of touch with Canadians and need to do some rethinking as to how that party runs, and not even with their own members, but with the rest of the country, that they were really out of touch with how angry Canadians are. I think that took them by surprise out on the campaign trail, and we'll see whether it ends up ultimately backfiring, and they, which is where you could see the upset tonight.
What's your thoughts on the double-digit lead that the Liberals had going into the campaign, which probably to a large extent was, the primary motivator or driver, behind them calling the election when they did?
Yeah, and
so went from a double-digit lead to being below the Conservatives to now being basically statistically tied.
Yeah, and that was the window, on the pandemic when the numbers were low, and we saw that in the summer. And in that calling of the election, they knew that by the time they called that we were starting to see the start of the fourth wave, and that was a very risky thing to do, to call an election for September 20th. When we have Alberta and Saskatchewan in crisis right now, starting to be in a fourth wave here in Ontario, that lead was not going to stay that high. I think that was a mistake. They by the time they called the election, they'd already seen the big upset in Nova Scotia to a majority Conservative government that nobody saw coming. But I think by that time they weren't, the train had left the station and nobody wanted to put the brakes on that train. It was heading out of there, and I think that we'll see if they manage to come out in the same place that they started, and if they did, hopefully there's some big lessons learned for that government.
Fair enough. So before we go to Alethea, we're just waiting on actual results to come in that'll be posted on the screen. So when they're available, they'll be posted. So Alethea, what's your thoughts on the double-digit lead, disappearing and then ending up in a statistical tie?
Yeah, much like what Cheryl commented on, there was a huge risk in calling the election, and we're seeing the effects of that now that we're going into the fourth wave. Again, I think there was a huge reliance on some of the great initiatives that the PM's office rolled out, again, talking about the SIR benefits and some of the other initiatives that he rolled out earlier, banking on that to be able to get him, to keep the momentum going and to give him a stronger lead. So a huge risk, but again, the numbers will show, and I think we'll see the results definitely tonight.
So speaking about SIRB and other initiatives that the government Liberals put in place to, as they kept saying, having people's backs, do we have a sense as to why they didn't enjoy some of the credit for that, and there was such a backlash right from the start, Cheryl?
I think that they misunderstood how hard this pandemic has been on ordinary Canadians. That there is, a lot of the anger that we saw out on the campaign trail and in our own riding, and we can talk about what happened in Bolton when the Prime Minister's event was cancelled. The level of anger that people have, and I don't know that they understand the difference between which level of government did it to them. The reasons people are drawn to the PPC party. They're angry about lockdowns, they're angry about masks, they're angry about a vaccine. They don't trust the
vaccine passports.
The vaccine passports mandates.
Yeah.
All of it
is provincial.
Exactly. But people don't understand that. I don't know that the Liberals did a good enough job at communicating all the things that they did to help Canadians during the pandemic, and they just got caught up in that general anger that people have. And we were locked down for such a long time, and people lost their self-autonomy. They were told you can't go to work, your kids can't go to school, your kids can't participate in activities. We've got some of that American politics that is infiltrated across the border, where there's a mistrust of mainstream media. And now we don't trust politicians, we don't trust the mainstream media, and now we don't trust the physicians and scientists that are telling us that vaccines are a good thing and they're going to save lives. Public health and the medical community got a lot of this messaging wrong right from the beginning. You don't need to wear masks. You do need to wear masks, but to protect other people, not yourselves. Oh, actually, yes, wear a mask to protect yourself. And I used to, in my role with the Canadian Network for Respiratory Care, I would have conversations with people from the National Advisory Committee on Immunization, and they would say, well, it's evolving science. And I would say the public doesn't understand evolving science.
That's exactly true, isn't it?
And this is where public health didn't do a good job on that, and that all leads to that general sense of mistrust of all of those institutions that people have. And it's been hard. It's been hard for all of us. It's been hard for our kids. It's been hard for our loved ones. And I think that the Liberals in Ottawa have been too out of touch with how hard this pandemic has been for everyday Canadians. And when they said, we don't want an election during this pandemic, they should have listened to them, because Canadians did not want this election. And that's really hard. And that's where we'll see how angry Canadians are tonight. Are they angry enough at the Liberals to vote for somebody else?
And that's a key question, right, Alethea?
It absolutely is. And, you touched on some really good points when you talk about how hard this election is for individuals, right? They haven't factored in the mental health impacts, right? Mental health increased significantly during the pandemic, and not just for adults, but for our young people as well, right? And so that's one of the things that will definitely show up in the polls tonight when the results coming. In terms of, again, some of the other initiatives that was rolled out, to your point, regardless if it was provincial, regardless if it was federal, the general population is looking at it as a government initiative. When I look at, for example, some of the funding that was put forward for the Black community, right? Many of that funding didn't actually reach the Black community, but that is something that is celebrated. When we look at even things that were rolled out for students, right, to be able to get benefits if you're an elementary student, to be able to help with studying from home. These are all great initiatives, but in the big picture of things, it doesn't really make an impact, right? Because at the end of the day, families are impacted, families are stressed, families are having to figure out how to navigate through this pandemic. Go out, don't go out, right? So much to what you were saying. So it has been really, really hard on individuals. So again, having the election at this point, again, we will see the numbers.
So we have our first guest. Deputy Mayor Steve Anderson of Shelburne is on the line, and we're going to get an opportunity to speak with Steve and ask him about this election. Steve, are you there?
Yes, I am, Bruce. Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's our pleasure to have you. Thank you for phoning in and participating. So you already know Alethea, and you'll remember Cheryl from the 2019 panel.
We miss you, Steve. We wish you were here tonight with us again.
Yeah, it would have been great.
I appreciate that. And let me just say right off the bat, I know, Bruce, you have some questions for me, but I just want to thank you guys for doing a tremendous job in covering local issues, and our community is certainly going to benefit from that. So thank you for your service.
Hey, you're really welcome, and we really appreciate you and your service and all the things that you're doing in Shelburne. So, Cheryl, you got a question for Steve or a comment?
Yeah, Steve, what's your prediction for tonight? Because as you remember, you were wrong the last time. So wondering if you have a different prediction for the outcome tonight in Dufferin-Caledon.
Well, I tried to do that last time, as you know, and I think we all got ourselves into some hot water.
Except me. Except me.
that is true. That is very true. Bruce touched on some things. I've been listening to the show since it started, and he talked about it's an incumbent's election to lose. And I would have to agree with that. I think back in 2019 or so, we looked at the demographics at that time and thought that, there might have been enough there to maybe turn the tide from blue to red, and we saw the outcome of that. Even though the demographics have continued to increase, the big question is it enough? And have the Liberals been able to really tap into that diversity that tends to generally favor the Liberal Party to get out and vote? And I guess that's what we're going to see tonight. Perfect. So predictions, I don't know if I'm prepared to make one. I think I'll just side with Bruce saying that it's an incumbent's election to lose.
Okay, fair enough. Alethea?
Deputy Mayor Anderson, welcome. My question to you is, what are your hopes specifically for the town of Shelburne? What are you hoping to see coming out of this election?
Somebody who's prepared to roll up their sleeves and address the issues that we all face, whether it's the town of Shelburne or any other municipality in Dufferin County. We have particular issues that certainly we're concerned about, which is the bypass that we've been looking for and asking for quite some time. Whatever assistance that we could get, certainly federal or provincial, to help deal with that issue is something that's important. Job creation, and just again, just somebody who's ready to work with municipalities to ensure that we're able to do our job.
Perfect.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, it would probably be terrific if municipalities, were given additional powers than they currently have, so that they could, be more autonomous entities. Don't you think?
Well, absolutely, Bruce. You know that very well. It feels like we're oftentimes coming with cap in hand, or we have our hands in handcuffs. And so autonomy is, I think, what every municipality is looking for across the board, and hopefully we'll get that, because I think we are the closest to our residents. We know what's best, and oftentimes, again, we struggle to make things that we know we need to make happen because of either cut in funding, et cetera, et cetera. So hopefully this time around, at least at a federal level, there is some help that we could get to achieve that autonomy, as you say.
Steve, do you think it's a problem that Dufferin-Caledon would have a non-government MP as the representative? Does that create a barrier for you at the town of Shelburne to reach through for government programs and funding potentially?
It certainly makes it challenging. There's no question about it. Look. At the end of the day, whatever assistance that we could get, we'll take it. Certainly, if we have an MP that has a party that's in government, or it belongs to a party that's in government, we expect things to roll to us maybe a lot quicker and easier, and it'll be more achievable, at least the goals and the ask. When the person is not in power and they're part of the opposition, obviously it's a lot more challenging. But look, I've worked with Kyle Seaback, the incumbent, as we've mentioned earlier. He's been, I'll call him a friend of Shelburne and some of the issues that we have. And so, whether it's him or Lisa, our job is just to work with anybody that's there to ensure that, we are heard and listened to and responded to.
Cool. I have a question that is more provincial in nature. Shelburne, as well as other municipalities, are benefiting from a specific amount of gas tax coming in. As we electrify and we move more and more away from gas car engines to electric vehicles, what's going on behind the scenes in terms of replacing that gas tax income that municipalities have been enjoying?
Well, that's a great question for the province to find out what's going on behind the scenes. Certainly, we would like to know what's happening. It's going to take a lot of creative thinking to fill that gap once that's removed. It's up to the province to really lay the roadmap as to how municipalities are going to continue to receive much-needed funding. I think what we've seen through COVID-19 is we have to be fluid and we have to learn to adapt, and I just hope that the government is prepared to do that. So, it's a question that I'm sure many other municipalities are asking themselves and are waiting for those answers, Bruce.
Exactly. Okay. I know I was putting you on the spot, and it's not a federal thing, but it's something that I've heard a lot of people talk about in terms of what kind of a stable income program are they going to be coming up with so that your municipalities and others continue to enjoy a certain level of income, because that definitely makes it easier for you guys to go through the budget process and make sure that you're able to cover off all the expenditures that you have. And as one of the fastest growing municipalities in Ontario, I'm sure that the challenges that Shelburne's facing are greater than they are in so many other places.
I would tend to agree with you, and the assistance is certainly needed. The last thing we need are cutbacks, that's for sure. But in addition to the needs of Shelburne, just in Dufferin County, there's the issue, as you guys know, about farmland and farmers, and being one of the major economic drivers in the municipality. Broadband, Bruce, is a major issue here too. So I'm really curious to see whoever takes the high chair at the end of this, what they're going to do to advocate for that industry, being our farmers, and certainly about making sure that our businesses have broadband, high-speed internet for them to be able to be competitive and to thrive.
Absolutely.
Steve, what do you think the issues that the people in Shelburne cared most about during this election? I mean, obviously broadband internet, everyone in Dufferin-Caledon brings that one up. But do you think there are other issues that were really top of mind for the voters in Shelburne?
Yeah, I would think that's a great question. I would think, certainly healthcare, and what's that going to look like for the remainder of the pandemic and through the pandemic. We've seen gaps in certainly services. We've seen certainly burnout amongst our frontline workers, and by way of them being overworked and through the pandemic. And so healthcare is certainly at the top of the list from the people that I've spoken to. Certainly jobs, federal support to programs. And another thing that, unfortunately, I must say, that hasn't been talked about a lot through the campaign is social justice and reconciliation. There are specks of it, certainly in the plans of the federal parties, but I didn't find a lot of people talking about it on the stump per se. And I must say that that's also a big issue. Making sure that we're putting an end to systemic discrimination and racism, et cetera, et cetera. That's just as important, in my view, as addressing climate change. And why do I dare say that? Because they're similar to some extent. When you talk about climate change, which we've heard a lot during the campaign, you're talking about a threat. You're talking about the impact to our younger generation. And you hear a lot of federal officials already saying, hey, listen, we're going to invest a number of dollars. We understand the threat, and they're setting targets. We need to see the same kind of talk and the same kind of language as we're talking about social justice issues as well, and for that to be taken seriously. So I've also heard many of our residents talking about that, and I think they're watching keenly as to how that's going to unfold, whoever takes power.
Okay, cool. What can you share with us how the Shelburne small business community has fared throughout COVID? Have you seen, unfortunately, a number of businesses close, or are you seeing that the majority of them have been able to, kind of muddle through and they're still here?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's going to be, town of Shelburne is no different than any other municipality, big city, whatever, where there are unfortunately casualties of war, and that's where we're in this battle of COVID-19. So yes, some businesses sure have likely closed, and some have remained open. A lot have remained open, thankfully, because some of the support systems that have been put in place. But this is where I want to give a big kudos to the Shelburne community, because they came out in force to ensure that many of these businesses that have remained open stayed open, by supporting and understanding, investing in your local community, because these people who are running their businesses are people who live in our community. So they're our friends, they're our neighbors, etc. And so, again, kudos to the Shelburne community for really coming out and, despite the hardships, have made it a point to make sure that these many more businesses did not close.
Cool. Well, and that's terrific. Alethea?
Yeah, I have actually a more generic question for you, Deputy Mayor Anderson. It's around, because you're a champion of diversity, equity, and inclusion, what are your thoughts with the record number of women who are running in this election for offices?
Wow, that's a fantastic question and a great observation. I think it's a great thing. It's great because we understand the importance of representation and what that means and how that goes to inspire our younger generation. We want our younger generation to be involved and engaged, and I think seeing these individuals, seeing these very accomplished women, very same accomplished women that are sitting at this very panel, it really inspires the younger generation to believe that they can. But I want to emphasize this. As much as that is good, it is important that parties place these women where they have an opportunity to actually succeed. And so putting them in ridings, for example, that, let's say, if you're a Liberal candidate that has historically been conservative, yes, they are there in number, but are they there with an opportunity to truly succeed? So we've seen a situation, for example, with the Liberals in Toronto where they handpicked Marcia Ian, put her in a Liberal-friendly riding, and gave her an opportunity to really succeed and take her efforts, her public service efforts, to another level. And I'd like to see more of that, if possible, so that they're not just there in numbers, but they actually have an opportunity to really do something in government.
Great answer, Deputy Mayor Anderson. Thank you so much. And you touched on Marcia Ian, and she's competing against another strong black female candidate in her riding. What are your thoughts on who's going to take that seat, that riding?
Well, as Bruce said, it's an incumbent election. Listen, you know what? We know by watching this that Annemie Paul spent, if not the majority, if not all of her time, the majority of her time in that particular riding. This is her second time, I believe.
Third.
She's tried. This is now her third time. You're absolutely right. And you know what they say, 3 strikes and you're out. So we'll see what happens if she's not able to achieve success. But she really hit the ground, put in a lot of time. And so that's one of the races, to be quite honest with you, outside, of course, our local race, that I'll be paying keen attention to see the outcome of that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Steve, we really appreciate you taking the time out to speak with us tonight. And, keep on trucking and doing all the good things that you're doing as Deputy Mayor in Shelburne. And thanks for taking the time with us tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Take care, guys.
Okay, you too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Cool.
Yeah, and we saw some results slip by the screen while we were talking to Steve there. So.
Very early results that are showing kind of a tie.
Yeah, Lisa would be very happy with those first results.
Well, if they end up sticking, she would be overwhelmingly delighted. But
oh, well, look at that.
Yeah, so now we've got our second, and what what we don't know is how many polls this represents, and we know that,
or where the polls are.
Yeah, and we know that in the last election, let me just get my numbers, there was just about 69,000 votes cast in Dufferin-Caledon. So, obviously these are early results, and we're a long way, from having a final result here. So
yeah, did they not show Aaron O'Toole not leading in his riding as well? I thought the Liberal was a Liberal not leading.
But again,
here,
it's really early results.
Yeah. Oh, look at that. So it's 7 out of 218. Okay.
So, there it is. Okay. So we've got 7 out of 218 polls reporting. So, and we also don't know where those polls are within the riding. So, they could be, anywhere in the riding. While we've got results up, what is your feelings about how the Green Party is going to do in this riding compared to how they did in the last election campaign? Cheryl?
So this one's a tough one because, full disclosure, Jenny is a friend of mine, and she is a community activist extraordinaire and just a wonderful, brilliant climate champion, and really wanted to use the opportunity to run this election to have the platform to get her voice out there.
She's really been incredibly active and aggressive on 413 and the air and wastewater treatment plant. I've got a good friend that lives in Bell Fountain and is part of that, and they've been fighting, and Jenny's been a big part of that. They've been fighting like crazy to try and stop that wastewater treatment plant, because their research shows, the science shows that it's going to kill the fish in the river.
Yeah, and on the 413, I mean, Jenny has been instrumental in really changing the conversation on that by getting, great exposure in the Toronto Star, really starting to get the rest of Ontario and Toronto voters to be aware of that issue. That was, just Jenny being extraordinary at what she does, and anyone who knows Jenny knows what an absolute powerhouse she is.
As to how she'll do compared to 2019?
Yeah, so I think, unfortunately, I mean, you've seen the Green Party support drop, and unfortunately the challenges going on in the party, I think have really hurt the party this year.
Yeah.
So
same with you.
I would agree as well. Yeah, I think she's a really strong candidate. I listened to her debate, and she came out as a superstar. Some of the points that she talked about, really scored some points in my book. But unfortunately, with the challenges going on with the Green Party, I think unfortunately, I think the numbers will decline.
Yeah. I have to agree for all those reasons, and I agree with Cheryl that she is an outstanding candidate, and she's worked really, really hard.
And I don't think this is the last we'll see of Jenny. We keep hoping she'll make the jump to perhaps a different level of government where she might have better chance of being successful, because everyone in Dufferin-Caledon would be well served by anything Jenny sets her mind to doing. So
absolutely, I concur with that. So Steve touched on a topic of diversity and black representation, and we talked briefly about that. So I think Alethea, you've done a little bit of digging in that area and have some to share with us.
Yeah,
please?
So from a diversity perspective, right across the country, we've seen an increase in number of black women who are running for office this term. And even if we look at Nova Scotia, for the first time, we have a record number of black individuals who are, part of the MLA. And so that is historic. Prior to So prior to the summer, there have been a total of 5 black representatives in Nova Scotia, dating back to, I think, from 1993. So the fact that we have 4 individuals right now is significant, and it is historic. And it's divided. We've got 2 females and 2 men who are in office in Nova Scotia there. Right here closer to home, we have some really amazing candidates. Again, we talked about, of course, Annemie Paul, who's Toronto Centre for the Green Party, Marcy Ian as well, and who's also another phenomenal leader, strong candidate. But even closer to home, we also have Ariel Kayabaga, who's running in London, who I think, will do some pretty stellar things, right? Another Liberal candidate. And then we have Leslyn Lewis, who ran against O'Toole for the Conservative
and she's
lead.
running in an incredibly safe Conservative seat of, I think it's called Norfolk Haldeman.
Exactly.
She's replacing Diane Finley, who was there for I want to say a good 20 years, and that seat is projected as a safe Conservative seat. So can we come back to this, because we have Jenny LaForce on the phone. So, hey, Jenny, are you there?
I am here. Hi, how are you?
Awesome. Thank you for sharing your time with us tonight. I've got Cheryl Connors, who you know well. with us, and Alethea O'Hara-Stevenson from the Dufferin Black Association in Shelburne.
Fantastic. Good evening. Hi, everyone.
So Jenny, I'm gonna jump in here, and I don't know if you just heard me singing your praises, but I was saying that I hope this wouldn't be the last that we see of you in political life. But tell us what your campaign was like. What did you really hear at the door? Because I know you knocked on a lot of doors throughout the campaign.
Yeah, we sure did. Consistently, we heard about affordability as being a very important issue for this riding. Lack of housing options, and climate emergency was definitely huge. And just how do we get out of this pandemic, and what are the next steps? People were really concerned about getting back to work and their small businesses. And I think a lot of the candidates heard that. I think that's very clear that those are the issues that sort of rose to the top of mind in the last 5 weeks.
That's great. And what about the events? Did you run into any negativity out on the campaign that we heard from Lisa's team that they experienced on the pandemic side?
Yeah, we did a little bit. We were doing a sign wave in Caledon East on one day, and we did get approached by an anti-vaxxer who thought that it was appropriate to hand us some materials about that. And when I said that, I could Google it and thank you very much, he was a bit persistent. But we had some sign damage as well. And actually, even this morning, it was a little bit disconcerting. We were approached by a man who told myself and my volunteer that we should be killed for running, which I found very disturbing. So, but, that was the last day of the campaign. So, yeah, that's, I guess, how it goes.
Yeah, I'm really sorry to hear that, Jenny. We were talking about diversity in candidates and wanting to see more women candidates, and certainly women appear to experience a different level of unpleasant experiences and sometimes threats than male candidates do, which can be a real barrier to getting women to run.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. I think we see that at the national level, and I guess now we've seen it sort of more at the local level. I think it speaks to the fact that we have more work to do in this country when it comes to equality and diversity and inclusion. I think right now there's a sense of entitlement of getting away with things that maybe people wouldn't do in their normal day-to-day. There's a heightened sensitivity and a heightened sense of feeling anger and disenfranchisement, and that's coming out a little bit on the campaign trail. I have to say I was pretty calm about it. It didn't rattle me too much. I was kind of waiting for it. I've seen things escalate over the last few weeks, but we were safe and we were in a public place, so it was handled.
And hopefully you were campaigning with other people and not by yourself.
Oh, yeah, no, I never went out by myself. We were very clear about that. We were always canvassing in groups, and even sign waving, never sign wave on your own. Always had somebody with me, for sure.
Alethea?
Awesome. Jenny, I have to say, first of all, congratulations on, having the courage to run. It takes a great deal of courage to put your foot in the race, and it's a lot of work. So I really commend you for the work that you're doing. I'm going to ask you a really personal question. I think it's important, especially for our audience. What was your motivation for running?
My child.
Awesome, I love it.
I'm a mom, and I'm also a teacher, and I look in the faces of these young kids, and I think climate grief is a real thing. I think they are feeling a lot of anxiety that needs to be recognized. And I felt very strongly that the environment is first and foremost for them. And we need to be all stepping up and working hard for these kids so that they have a bit more hope and a bit more sense of direction on where this country is going.
That's fantastic. That's a great legacy to leave for your little one to leave behind, right? And setting that foundation for them to now carry on. Hopefully, one day they'll run as well.
Absolutely.
Since you speak of a young one, I know that you debated passionately about, internet service in especially the rural areas. What are your thoughts around, getting more of that satellite link, across Dufferin County?
Yeah, I don't understand why we're still debating broadband and Swift. To be honest, I'm not trying to be an advertisement for Elon Musk or anything, but a lot of people are turning to Starlink because they're just desperate. Certainly with the pandemic, working from home, having two parents or one parent, working online, and then a child perhaps having to do school online, we need a better connection. And I don't think it should come out of our tax-paying, dollars as well. We should get some more help from our government to make sure that it's an essential service, just like hydro. So, I know people who have paid, $1,400 plus for internet, and they should be getting subsidies for that, especially while we're in a pandemic.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jenny.
Yeah, you're so right about broadband internet, and we shouldn't be having this debate any longer. It should have already been a done deal, and I think we feel that both the federal and provincial levels of government have dropped the ball.
They have.
And not put the importance onto this issue. I can remember 100%. Years ago. When I worked for a small business organization, I had some farmers in York Region as members, and in an old decrepit barn, the technology that they had, and this is like 15 to 20 years ago, just absolutely blew my mind. And I wonder how the agriculture people in this area who don't have broadband internet, are able to take advantage of all the the technologies that is available. And when I see programs about American farmers, and they're using this technology as if it's second nature, and we're still waiting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're being left behind in so many ways, and rural broadband is definitely one of them. I know many people who are pretty upset that we're being taxed for a service that we don't actually get, and it's been going on for years. So I think we definitely need to put some more pressure on our local and our provincial and our federal.
So loaded question.
Get it sorted out. Sure.
If I read the Conservative platform correctly, they're okay with allowing outside of Canada companies, U.S. companies, for example, to come into Canada and provide internet services. What's your feeling about that? In spite of the big three in Canada having essentially a monopoly and just not doing the right things in terms of providing widespread broadband internet.
So I feel like we're shooting ourselves in the foot constantly. We privatize things, and then we are, basically paying through the nose for things that should be essential. So why aren't we incentivizing a national program across from coast to coast where people can access internet, and it's being subsidized by the government, so that we're not being left behind. We've created this issue where the CRTC has this monopoly, and we're not getting anything for our dollars. So I think it just doesn't make any sense to me. We have the technology now in Starlink. Why isn't the Canadian government looking at doing something for the people who live in Canada? And I don't think it needs to be privatized. I think we need to have a free market, but that technology is out there. So let's get creative.
Exactly. And you mentioned Starlink with Elon Musk. I have a very techie-oriented son who's bought property in Prince Edward County, and even though they have literally just started to put the foundation in, he has signed up and paid for Starlink months ago because he can't wait to have high-speed broadband when his house is ready.
Yeah, nobody can wait, really. I mean, if you're trying to stay competitive and you're working from home, you actually need that service. So, if it's a $700 hookup fee, and then after that it's $100 a month, but it's unlimited, and that's the difference. you know, when you're basically putting a quarter in and having to watch your limit, but you're also have 3 people or 4 people working from home. I mean, it's just too expensive. So we need to definitely address that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jenny, what's next for you? Where are we going to see you after this election? Because we don't want you to go away.
I've been hearing that a lot recently. I have to think about that. You know, I guess we'll see what the results are tonight. It's looking, if it's another minority government, we could have another federal election sooner than we would all like, in which case it would be a disservice to the local Green Party to have them look for another candidate, and I would be willing to run again. You know, it takes two runs or kicks at the can when you're running federally. So I think that would be fair, but we'll see. You know, I can't really say yet.
And can you share with us what kind of support you got from the Green Party in terms of providing you with, you know, various types of assistance to run?
Yeah, I was very fortunate. You know, we had a pretty good result in the last election, so I was able to start off with posters, with campaign materials, with an office, with a campaign manager who was fantastic. He really was phenomenal.
Yes.
So I was starting off from a good place, which was lucky because it was such a quick campaign. But we were pretty organized and ready to go right off the bat. So, you know, building on that is what we're going to do next.
Perfect. Thank you. And
thank you.
And thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us tonight. And we all wish you all the best going forward. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Enjoy your party tonight.
Yeah, enjoy your party, okay?
I will.
Okay.
Bye, Jenny.
Okay, thank
bye,
you.
Jenny.
Bye-bye.
Okay. So on the line we have, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing her name correctly, Noor Jahangir, who is the NDP candidate in Wellington Halton Hills. And I just got that Noor's mom is running in Guelph.
Oh, wow.
Exciting.
Family affair.
We've got some stuff to talk about. So Noor, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much for having me today.
Perfect. Can you speak up a little bit, please?
Yes, are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Amazing.
Okay, so just hang on for a second, Noor. So for our viewers, we're speaking with, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing the name correctly, Noor Jahangir, who is the NDP candidate for Wellington Halton Hills, and we're going to ask her about her mom, who apparently is the NDP candidate in the riding of Guelph. First of all, am I pronouncing your name correctly?
So it's actually pronounced Noor Jahangir.
Noor Jahangir. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you for correcting me. I like to be able to pronounce people's names correctly. So we really appreciate you taking the time to be on the air with us. Our Rogers TV viewing area extends out into Erin, which is part of your riding. So if I could lead off, can you just share with us some of your experiences in running for the NDP and the kind of challenges that you have faced?
Yeah, so of course. So it's been a huge honor and privilege to run and to represent Jagmeet in the NDP. I'm extremely proud to have been able to speak up and use my youthful voice to fight for change. And I was extremely glad to be able to speak to Wellington Halton Hills voters and find out the issues that mattered most to them.
Perfect. So I ride the Elora to Cataract Rail Trail several times a week, and I ride through Fergus on my way to Elora, and I see your election signs when I'm riding through the town. So that's just terrific, and
thank you.
For somebody that is so young to be so passionate, I can hear the passion in your voice. And,
thank you.
Yeah, and it's absolutely terrific. So, Cheryl, do you have?
Yeah. What were the issues that you found out there that the residents you talked to were caring about during this election?
So I found out that, you know, a lot of the issues were around COVID recovery and like the pandemic, and when it came to small businesses, how they were able to or had difficulties bouncing back from COVID. And, you know, as we're entering a fourth wave, just the uncertainty of how, you know, of what's going to happen. When I spoke to voters, I also, you know, it was a pleasure being able to understand the issues that of Wellington Halton Hill, of the people that lived in Wellington Halton Hills, and how they shared similar issues as the people in Guelph do. I also found that a lot of the issues were, you know, based around the environment, and obviously we are going through a climate crisis, and I found that a lot of the individuals in the riding were concerned about the environment and, you know, how we're going to be able to you know, tackle the climate crisis.
Okay, and just to remind our viewers, we're speaking with the NDP candidate for Wellington Halton Hills, Newer-Yahangar, and I'm probably butchering that name
you
again.
did, you did.
I probably just did, and I apologize for that.
Okay.
And just so our viewers know, Alethea.
Yes, hi Noor, and I'm so inspired by you know, your nomination to your candidacy. Actually, when I saw your age and read your bio, I said, wow, right? This is the perfect age for someone to get into the race and to make an impact. One of the questions that I wanted to ask you was, running this election, did you notice any difference in running your campaign compared to when you were helping your mom in previous elections, managing her campaign?
So of course, I think that, you know, like you had said, I am 22 years old, right? So to be quite honest with you, my mom did inspire me to run in 2019 because I didn't really fully understand how many Canadians were struggling and how many Canadians, you know, were scared, right? And being young, I'm one of those Canadians that are scared, right? I'm frustrated with the uncertainty, right? How am I going to be able to afford a home? How am I going to be able to afford to continue my studies, right? So when I worked alongside my mom's campaign and I, you know, was by her side listening to the issues that people experienced in the Guelph riding, I noticed that a lot of those issues were quite similar to the issues that Wellington Halton Hills, the people living inside the riding had. And it was, yes, it was a lot more different, but at the same time, when my mom was running this time and I was running, it was great to be working with her because it gave me an opportunity to learn from her, right? Or more so learn from each other. So it's been, you know, in 2019 now, it's been a great experience.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. One other follow-up question for you. You touched on affordability, and given your age, what are your thoughts around funding from an education perspective, making tuition free? I know some platforms were canvassing or campaigning for, you know, post-secondary education to be free, right? So that we can invest in our future. So what are your thoughts on that?
So I think, you know, being a student, I have completed my undergraduate and my undergrad, and to be honest, my plan was to do my master's. But the reason I wasn't able to pursue my master's was because of financial burdens, right? There was not enough support from the government, and it was quite frustrating that I wasn't able to go to school because there wasn't enough funding, right? I'm still, right now, I'm attending George Brown for a post-grad program. That being said, I wanted to do my master's. So there was a huge, when it came to cost of tuition, there was a huge difference, and I wasn't able to pay for my master's. Now, I know that other parties' platforms do include free tuition. That being said, I think there's long ways to go. I would love to have free tuition, but, you know, I just don't think that it is practical as of now. I don't think that we will be able to provide free tuition when it comes to post-secondary as of now.
Wow.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that's refreshing, eh?
Right, and you know, it's very frustrating because a lot of individuals will ask me like, oh, so Noor, what motivated you to run at such a young age? And you know, my answer is this. You know, it's when I have had conversations with my parents about expressing my frustration with, you know, the uncertainty of when it comes to me buying a home, or the uncertainty of me pursuing my, you know, my post-secondary education, or the uncertainty of the climate crisis, right? These are all things that are going to impact people that are my age a little bit larger than it would impact someone who was, you know, a little bit older, right? So it's just very frustrating, and I think that's why it's so important to have youth run in office and to represent Canada.
Perfect. And what a great spot to end our conversation, Noor. So we greatly appreciate you taking the time. We wish you all the best in your future, and hopefully your post-secondary aspirations end up getting fulfilled. And
Thank you so much.
And just keep on trucking. You're doing fantastic. So thank you very much.
Yeah, we feel like
it.
we'll be hearing from you again.
Yeah.
So best of luck.
Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks. So we've just been having a conversation with the NDP candidate from Wellington Halton Hills riding. I'm just going to go with her first name, Noor, because that one I can say okay.
Can I give you a hint? Can I actually give you a little tip?
Sure.
So if you don't know how to pronounce my last name, what I always tell people is think of John Deere, but replace the deer with gear. So think of like a tractor, John Deere.
Okay.
Right?
Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate it. And
you're welcome.
Yeah. And have a great evening. Thanks.
You as well.
It's John Zier.
Yeah, John
Have a
Zier.
great night. Thank you so much.
Yeah, John Zier. Thank you. Bye-bye. All right. So one of the neat things that came out of that call was how exciting it is that we've got young people that are willing to, you know, put themselves out there and run for office. 22 years old is really exciting and inspiring, don't you think?
That is beyond inspiring, and I think the other candidate in that riding, Ranju, is also in his 20s, and again 26, I believe, and no words. It's absolutely incredible to see our young people stepping up and stepping into leadership positions at such a young age. And it just sets the tone for what's to come, right? I predict the next election you'll have more young people stepping up to the plate and getting their names out there. They know what they want, and most importantly, they have a voice. And we have seen that we have seen that over the last year, especially throughout the pandemic, with all of the diversity, equity issues, young people leading the charge. And I predict that in the next election, we will see more and more young people stepping up and making their voices heard.
Right on. So if we look at the board, Kyle Seaback has just pulled ahead of Lisa Post, 10 polls out of 218 reporting. She had the lead up until the 10th poll, and Kyle has now taken a lead. I think it's interesting to note how few votes the People's Party candidate has, because we had kind of, I think, expected that we'd be seeing higher votes. And in the Wellington Halton Hills riding, Michael Chong is ahead.
Yes, by quite a bit.
Yeah, by quite a bit. They have showed those numbers, but right now we're seeing some other Rogers viewing area numbers for the Durham area ridings, and I think Aaron O'Toole, Michael Chong has basically a 2-to-1 lead over Melanie Lang, who is the Liberal candidate, and we've only got 5 out of 240 polls that have reported so far. And actually, the People's candidate in Wellington Halton Hills is doing better than the one in our riding at the moment. But as pointed out, with so few polls reporting, we're still a long way from having some more actual results. and so, you know, that's, and we're looking at right now Burnaby South, which is Jagmeet Singh's riding, and again, it's only one poll reporting, so, you know, the numbers are not, you know, where we need to see them, yeah, we're still sitting at 10 polls reporting in Dufferin-Caledon out of 218, and Kyle has a small lead, and so we'll just, you know, and right now Jenny Laforestier is running in 4th place, and what's interesting is the amount of votes that the NDP candidate is getting in this riding for someone who we understand didn't campaign and who didn't get nominated until I think the writ was issued. So, you know, there's obviously a core NDP vote that, you know, votes regardless, don't you think?
Yeah, and that would be supporting Jagmeet, I mean, who's very popular, especially with the younger voters. I mean, that TikTok stuff that he does.
It's pretty neat, eh?
Yeah, he is. Anyway, I promised I wouldn't mention anything because I was told I wasn't allowed to talk about my 20-year-old son tonight. But it's really hard not to, and I'll probably get in trouble when I get home. But I mean, it was really interesting to listen to Nora talk about the issues facing that age group. I think that late teens, early 20s has been the age most hurt by the pandemic. They've been locked down, having to do virtual college, university, sometimes starting a new program, you know, from home, not getting to have that real college, university experience, which is such an important part of growing up and developing and becoming independent. Sitting at home in front of a laptop, still with mom and dad, wasn't at all what these kids were looking for their college university experience. So they're disenfranchised. They've been hurt. It's been almost 2 years now of being at home when they're not out, you know, with their friends, making new friends, you know, dating, doing all the things that group should do. They're worried about climate change, and the question is, you know, are they disenfranchised enough to vote? You know, were they angry? Will they have got out and vote? Because the NDP vote does skew lower, and is that going to? You mean lower age group?
Yeah.
Yes. Is that going to show up in the polls today? Did they get out and vote? Extraordinary that someone is a candidate, but you know, sometimes that age group is like they're all the same. There's no point in voting for anybody.
We'll have to wait until the demographic results come in, you know, after the election, before we have a sense if, you know, young people have gotten out and voted, right?
Yeah, definitely. But to touch on your point again, you know, are they disenfranchised? I think the pandemic has created other opportunities for our young people to step into leadership positions, right? I mentioned earlier that, you know, last year with all of the diversity issues that took place right across the country, right across even in the States, we saw young people at the helm leading the charge, right, and making their voices heard. Even in the town of Shelburne, we see a lot of young people stepping up into leadership positions, whether it's on the diversity task force, and letting their voices heard. So I think we can continue to see our young people, instead of being frustrated, I think they will definitely take matters into their own hands. And as I said, possibly run for future elections, but definitely stepping into positions of leadership, whether being a page in Parliament as an example, right? Lots of young people are stepping into those positions right now. So the future is bright. Climate change, we continue to see young people again leading the charge right across the globe and talking about the issues that are important to them. So I don't think they're going to stay silent at all. They will definitely be stepping into some leadership roles.
Which is very cool. And earlier, you were talking about diversity and some of the stuff that's happened in Nova Scotia with the 4 new black MLAs. Talk to us a little bit, if you would, please, about what's going on in Shelburne in terms of diversity and how the population is shifting radically.
Yeah, so Shelburne, of course, is one of the fastest growing communities in Ontario, and the population, of course, has changed significantly as a result. So from a diversity perspective, we have the Black community makes up the largest visible minority population in Shelburne. And then we have further breakdown with the South Asian community, and the numbers, go down from there. But when you look at the visible minority community in Shelburne, it takes up a significant number, right? And enough to make our voices heard. And we're seeing the effects of that with a number of diversity initiatives that have taken place. You've got a Muslim of Shelburne, the Shelburne Muslim community, who have made their voices heard.
In a huge way. Very positive way.
Absolutely. Yeah. We also have other religious organizations, for example, the Sikh community, that have established a home base in not quite Shelburne, but on the outskirts of Shelburne, where they have a place for their community to get together and worship. The Black community, again, when you look at from an economic perspective, you have a number of Black-owned organizations in the town of Shelburne, religious facilities, again, in the town of Shelburne that are Black-led, which is speaking volumes to the change that has taken place in the last couple of years, and the change is continuing.
So my understanding is that the visible minority percentage in Shelburne is somewhere in the 25 to 30% range?
For the total, yes,
yeah.
Visible, yes.
And we've got new subdivisions going in on the west side, and there's a brand new massive subdivision going in on the east side, just on the north side of 89 across from the No Frills. And help me out here. What I'm kind of hearing is that by the time those two subdivisions are full, we're going to be looking at around 50% visible minority in Shelburne.
It is quite possible, and one of the interesting things that we're seeing too is the number of interracial families that are moving into the community as well, right?
Oh wow, very cool.
So, and that adds another layer of diversity to the puzzle. But yeah, the numbers that we're talking about right now are based on the last stats, so 2016. So between 2016 and now, the numbers have increased significantly. And we'll continue to see the changes.
So when those two subdivisions are full and you're at or around the 50% mark, you're going to be basically comparable to the City of Toronto, which is over 50% visible minority. And by comparison, Orangeville is sitting at around 7, 8, 9. And Caledon, help me out here, is under 10, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's incredibly extraordinary what's happening in Shelburne, and what do you think about the impact that's going to have, on electoral politics, going forward, whether it's municipal, provincial, or federal?
So let me start with municipal.
Okay. I know that's a huge question. Yeah, it's a huge, and I'm putting you on the spot a bit.
Yeah, no worries. From a municipal perspective, elections coming up next year, and guarantee the face of council will change. There are a number of individuals, qualified individuals, that will definitely be putting, diverse individuals that will be putting their name in the race for office. I have to say, the Deputy Mayor, Steve Anderson, has done amazing things in the town of Shelburne around diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives to put Shelburne on the map, right? From establishing the Anti-Black Racism Task Force for the town of Shelburne, right? Those recommendations have been viewed right across Ontario, right? People as far as Nova Scotia have reached out to say, hey, what's going on in Shelburne?
Wow.
Tell me more. So, it speaks to the kind of leadership that is already in place. It speaks to the inclusion that individuals are starting to feel in the town of Shelburne, and that's one of the reasons why people are wanting to move to Shelburne, right? Because they see the leadership and they see the change and all the great things that is happening there. From a provincial perspective, again, I think we're seeing some of those changes already, starting to take shape, right? With Lisa Post running for office again. Typically, the Black community or the visible minority community would be more a liberal type of community, right? So you're seeing some of those trending happening right now where there's more votes going towards the liberal. And I think in the near future, I think the election will definitely change. We'll see, a liberal candidate in office very soon. Federally, again, we're going to be looking for leaders to be accountable, right? Individuals have said that they are going to do X, Y, and Z for the Black community or for visible minority communities. Individuals are going to be more vocal and let their voices heard and make leaders accountable.
Excellent. So Toronto Centre, which we had talked about a little earlier with Marcienne being a Black candidate and the incumbent, has at least a 3-to-1 lead over her nearest opponent, and unfortunately Annamie Paul is running
fourth.
Very
distant fourth.
Distant fourth and very far behind. So it looks like there will be at least one Black female in Parliament, in our next Parliament.
Yes.
Yeah.
That should be exciting. We definitely need more than one, right?
Yes, absolutely.
But having a voice at the table is critical and definitely important. So
yeah. Well, there's two guys within the Liberal caucus that are Black. Greg Fergus and Emmanuel. I can't remember his last name. They're both Quebec-based MPs, and probably they're going to be re-elected tonight.
Yeah, I have a strong feeling that Greg will definitely be in office again.
Yeah, so there'll be at least 3 Black MPs. So
that's good, but we need more women. Visible minority women specifically in office.
Agree.
And we're talking about visible minority women, and I've said Black women specifically quite a few times, but even from an Indigenous perspective, right, we need to make sure that those voices are in office as well. And it goes back to making sure that, as Steve mentioned earlier, that we're putting individuals in winnable seats, right? It's not enough for parties to say that, we're meeting diversity quotas and, we have X number of females, running. It's important to make sure that we're providing them with the funding, we're providing them, putting them in ridings that are actually winnable. So there's a lot of work to be done. And
isn't that huge?
It's significant. Yeah. It makes all the difference in the world, right?
Yeah.
If you look at statistics, again, you'll have from a white men perspective, right, predominantly they're getting the majority of the fundings, right? They're placed in ridings that they're going to win, and they continue to win election after election. So lots of work to be done by these parties.
Yeah, and I think all parties have made it a diversity a priority, not just on the female-male side, but also on having different backgrounds. Representing the parties.
I just saw the Greens are leading in 3 ridings now, so I'm wondering if that's Kitchener plus Paul Manley's riding. So that's going to be an upset from
Paul
the
Manley's
pollsters.
Riding is out in BC, and the polls are probably not even closed yet.
Yeah.
So that might be Kitchener Centre.
Kitchener Centre, but where's the third one?
I don't know. Yeah. There might have been one in Atlantic Canada that we haven't seen results on the screen for yet. Mm-hmm. So Kyle Seaback has extended his lead, and I think we're up to 11 or 12 polls out of 200, and I believe it was 15. It's still too close to give any real results in Burnaby South, which is Jagmeet's Singh's riding, because there's only 2 polls reporting. Here we are at 17 out of 218. Kyle Seaback is just under 1,000, and Lisa Post is 558. And Jenny Laforestier is still running ahead of Anthony Zambito. So
well, that's good to see.
Yeah, it's good to see. Okay, so I've just been told that we have Anthony Zambito, the People's Party candidate for Dufferin-Caledon, on the line. So, Anthony, welcome. Are you there?
Thank you for having me.
Anthony? Okay, Anthony, are you there?
Hi, can you hear me?
Okay, perfect. Yes, if you'll speak up. I'm Bruce, and we've got Cheryl. and Alethea on the line here. How are you tonight?
I am doing well, thank you. I am just following the election coverage, jumping through a bunch of different broadcast streams, so it's been really fun to follow along.
You know, from what I've been hearing, you have been having a good time campaigning.
Oh yeah, it's been a lot of fun. This has been both a busy and rewarding experience, I'll say that much. So yeah, it's been a pleasure and an honor.
Awesome.
All right, Alethea, have you got comment or question?
Yeah, so I'm going to jump off, the point that you just mentioned. It's been a rewarding experience. Why has it been rewarding?
The community that this campaign has been able to build has been inspiring. This has without a doubt been the most grassroots campaign in my lifetime that I've ever seen before. I've been staying along the campaign trail. It's been the most grassroots campaign in Dufferin-Caledon history. The amount of volunteers from the local level who have stepped up to the plate to help us out, the amount of people who have donated money, like, moms, papas, your neighbors, your son's baseball coach, whoever. The amount of people who have stepped up to donate to this campaign has been inspiring. And no matter what, I feel like a winner. I couldn't care less what the results say. The fact that the community has been able to come behind my campaign the way it has, I'm super thankful.
That's fantastic. In terms of where the results are at right now, any surprises? Are you seeing things that you expected, or what are your thoughts?
I'm just having fun watching them come in. We still have so much counting to do. So as of right now, as long as they come in, I'm just going to continue watching.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Cool. Cheryl?
No.
Huh? Nothing for you?
No.
So this is, what made you decide to run for federal office?
Well, it's simple. Our constitutional rights get stepped on every day, and it gets hard to look at, right? I mean, when you take into account who the leader of our country is, Justin Trudeau, everybody wanted him out. So it's no surprise. When you take a look at the SNC Lavalin scandal, when you take a look at the crimes he's committed, when you take a look at, the scandal, everything. We just had another blackface picture released yesterday. This is not what you expect from the commander-in-chief of the country. Everybody wanted to see him leave, and I'm really happy to see people step up like that.
Okay. Thank you very much. We really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us tonight, and, good luck going forward, okay?
No worries. I just want to say thank you so much for having a diverse and inclusive cast. I'm noticing that there's not a single Asian person up there. There's not a single Latino person up there. There's not a single Indigenous person. People continue to talk about diversity and inclusivity, but that also includes diversity and inclusivity of thought. Everybody has a different opinion. It doesn't matter where you come from. In this country, we're all Canadian. That's the reason why this campaign happened, and I'm so excited to continue it no matter what the results are.
Okay, appreciate it.
Again.
All right, thank you very much. Have a great evening, okay?
Thanks, Anthony.
All right, take care. Bye-bye. So I just got a news flash that the CBC has projected a Liberal government.
A Liberal minority government.
Well, they're not saying whether it's minority or majority. They're just projecting a Liberal government at this point.
CTV declared a Liberal minority government.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
go to your layout manager on web updates.
And so Wellington, Halton Hills, Michael Chong has pulled away to a pretty good lead at this point with 19 out of 240 polls reporting. And as we were talking about earlier, and Steve Anderson, the Deputy Mayor of Shelburne, talked about this, to a large extent, we're in an incumbents election. And Michael is definitely a long-term incumbent.
Yeah.
And would be exceedingly difficult to displace.
Yeah, he's definitely got a huge track record in his riding, and great family history and roots in Wellington, Erin. So it'll be really, really hard to get him out of office unless he decides never to run again, right?
Exactly.
And even so, I think it's still a strong conservative base, so it'll be a hard to switch.
Yeah, and Kyle, has basically pulled ahead by a 2-to-1 margin over Lisa Post. So we're not sure where the votes are coming from, and there's still only about 20 polls reporting. So, but it looks like Kyle's establishing a lead.
So I guess no surprise based on our early predictions. So yeah, it's still early, but
to a large extent, it's playing out the way I think most of us thought it would, eh?
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, and quite frankly, we didn't see much of Kyle during this election. It didn't look like he seemed pretty confident that we didn't see his teams out doing as much work that we saw 2 years ago, that I think he thought he didn't have to work as hard.
Because I asked, none of us received literature in our houses, and we all live in different communities. I talked with other people who had not received any Kyle Seaback literature. I think you said you received one Lisa piece?
Yes, actually, Lisa canvassed on my street, and by accident, she looked over and she saw.
And there you were.
Right, and so I was able to have a conversation with her and received her literature.
Yeah, and I got something in the mail, although Cheryl indicated she had not gotten anything. And
yeah, so I'm in rural Caledon in Palgrave, and we received not a single piece of campaign literature from any candidate. I always feel and the rural houses are very difficult for people to canvass on. We know we get left out, but generally people try to do at least a mailing to us, and we didn't receive anything. And yet our voter turnout is high. So we're the forgotten voters that campaigns don't spend time on. And for such a short election, I certainly understand it. What we did receive, props is, because I'd like to ask the panel's position for the few months leading up to the election, we certainly received upside down a lot of mail from our MP. So this is all
taxpayer provided literature with a real partisan flair from here's one. How should I vote? Though I think he's talking about voting on a bill there. Yeah.
But this is pretty partisan from our MP. After an MP gets elected, I feel strongly that they have to represent the people that didn't vote for them as well. Once you're the MP, and being inundated with all of this on our tax dollars. Did he need to spend any money on his campaign? By the way, is that why?
Within a few months. January and it's not everything. Between January and June.
So how does someone if an incumbent is able to use their Government of Canada tax dollars to inundate the electorate with this kind of material, how does someone like Lisa Post running for the Liberals with a really limited budget, having to raise funds, how do you compete with this as a candidate?
It's absolutely hard to compete, right? And that's one of the things, again, we talked about earlier. We need to make sure that these parties are putting funds in the candidates' pockets so that they can go out and campaign, successfully.
On a level playing field.
Exactly, absolutely. Even when we talked about volunteers, the volunteer base for the Liberal Party in our community was significantly smaller than what the Conservative parties had. So we need to do more work. The parties need to do more work to make sure that their candidates are successful. One of the things that I noticed again is, here, and not to do a selfless plug, but the Dufferin-Caledon Canadian Black Association, prides itself on advocacy, and not one of the 5 candidates reached out to say, how can we tap into your demographic? How can we learn more what the values are of the community? So to me, that is shocking. Here you have a platform that can speak to and get your message across and understand the needs of the community, and that wasn't utilized. So disappointing, but again, it speaks to, again, making sure that these candidates know that organizations are there to help them, get their message out.
So, do you, Cheryl, do you think, Kyle is just, doing an MP's job and keeping, in touch in a written format with his constituents, and that it's, and I'm playing devil's advocate, is it fair game, as an MP of a particular party to be, promoting that party and dissing or saying negative things about other parties, and specifically the governing party in this case?
I think that, there's a line to cross. This one here, Justin Trudeau proves he's no feminist again. This is blatantly partisan. This should be election material. Is this what a member of parliament should be doing? Does this represent the people in the community that didn't vote for you? And you're talking about this is the incumbent's election to use, but does this cross a line into, using, because those people in the riding who did not vote Conservative also paid to have this printed and distributed. Okay. And this for sure, I believe, crosses a line into what a member of parliament shouldn't be using tax dollars for. And I never saw the,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we good?
We're good.
Okay, so we're going to take a break for a few minutes now, so that you can look at the numbers on your screens, and we'll be back, and we'll continue to have the scintillating conversation that we're currently having. So we'll see you in a few minutes. Thanks.
Did I go too far?
No, but I did get a voice in my ear. Okay, hi, welcome back. And just to refresh your memories, I'm Bruce Walkinshaw, your host, and I've got these beautiful panelists, Cheryl Connors and Althea O'Hara Stevenson on the panel. And we just got breaking news that they've declared that Kyle Seaback has won Dufferin-Caledon, and I'm presuming the same is happening for Michael Chong in Wellington, Halton Hills. And they have declared a Liberal government. It looks like it's going to be a minority at this point, and if you are looking at the results, the popular vote for both parties is virtually identical, which is how they ended up basically tied in the polling results. And we have on the line the Green Party candidate for Wellington Halton Hills, and again, this is another young person by the name of Ran Zhu, and I hope I'm pronouncing his last name correctly. So Ran, are you with us?
Drew as in I drew something, and ran as in I ran somewhere, so.
Perfect.
Almost.
Hey, Ran, welcome. And you're speaking with Bruce Walkinshaw, Cheryl Connors, and Alethea O'Hara Stevenson on our Rogers TV election night panel. So how are you feeling tonight?
I'm feeling a lot of warmth, so I'll tell you a little bit about my night. I was in Erin at a private farm, and we were doing our celebratory election night watch party, and we ended that around 9 p.m. because there's a lot of seniors on our campaign, but another volunteer and I are now in Kitchener Center to watch Mike Morris's campaign, so much more energy here. But you know, I know heading into my campaign it was always going to be an uphill battle, but there are no regrets, and I'm really looking at all the warmth I've received at the doors, and that certainly outweighs the door slams.
Very cool. And when I was on my bike ride on the Elora Cataract Trail, and I was going through the town of Fergus, I was seeing your signs in many places. And,
right.
And you actually had great looking signs, and the particular green you used was a really terrific one. So,
well, thank you so much.
So we're really delighted to be able to speak with you this evening. Cheryl, do you have comments or questions for Ran?
Ran, I'm really sorry to hear that you had doors slammed in your face. Did you? What are people angry about? What did you hear at the doors?
Well, I can count on one hand the number of doors that slammed in my face. So those conversations didn't even start. I said who I am, and then I got a door slam. But the rest, I would say, are all friendly conversations. You know, I'm hearing a lot about vaccines at the doors. I'm hearing a lot about climate change at the doors, and all of these conversations, if they're giving me a few minutes of their time, are all warm conversations. And I recall one guy actually saying, I'm going to vote for Chong, but I heard your pitch, and if you win, I won't be angry. And I keep telling that story to people because I think it's such a genuine, warm compliment, and it really gave me motivation to just keep walking down that street, because sometimes the volunteers and I are certainly having a tough time getting more warm receptions, but these conversations certainly outweighs everything else. It makes everything worth it, and this is from a voter that's not going to vote for me.
And what did you...
Sorry. If I could just for a moment, viewers, we're speaking with the Green Party candidate from Wellington Halton Hills, Ran Zhu, and if we could ask Alethea if she has comments or questions for Ran, please.
Absolutely, Ran, and you know, thank you for putting your name in the race. And you know, I can hear the passion and the energy that you have in your voice, Till. This doesn't sound like it's the end of the line for you. Am I correct?
Definitely not. I've worked in politics all my life. I'm not sure if everyone knows, but the last 3 years I was working for Mike Schreiner. I was his constituency coordinator, and obviously he's the Green Party MPP in Guelph. So that green wave is here in Ontario, and I'm happy to see that it's Kitchener tonight. So I have enough energy to run a few more election cycles. I've told my more senior volunteers that I'm going to do this, so I'm not going to fall back on my word.
Excellent. I love to hear that. What is the biggest lesson that you've learned from this campaign?
That's a good question. Well, it's not really over yet. There's a lot of aftermath, But I think the biggest lesson that I've learned that, I was talking about it at my speech tonight at my campaign event, is that I think Greens really are running for other people. I know that a lot of the concerns I'm hearing about is, I don't like the carbon tax, or I don't like the tax that's going to be imposed on this house, or I don't want to phase into another economy where oil and gas workers will be losing their jobs. But I think those are all somewhat about our own interests, whereas I'm running because I care about the climate. I care about who's going to be on this planet after my generation, and all the volunteers on my team are also that way. So I think it was a reminder about what my values are, and just that I'm in this for public service and not power.
That's fantastic. One follow-up question for you. I noticed that you were a economics and theater major from York University.
Yeah.
How much of that came into your political campaign, if any at all?
Well, it certainly did. It gave me a lot of technical background on just to speak on policy, but the theater background, see, I was a high school drama kid. I was in every play. I wanted to be an actor when I got into theater school at York, and obviously that isn't quite happening at the moment, but I think what it has helped is make me more well-spoken, and it just made me more comfortable to speak in public and just go through with 7 debates without having to take a shot, because I've gotten some strangers emails that just said, hey, you did great at the debates. I'm very impressed, young man, and I think that theater degree certainly helped there.
And just a reminder, viewers, we're speaking with the Green candidate from Wellington, Halton Hales, Rand Drew, and I think we're all really energized by the amount of energy that this young person has, and the experience, that he has. And if I could segue, you had mentioned Kitchener Centre. Do you have any idea how Mike Maurice is doing in that riding for the Green Party?
Well, he is leading in the polls right now, so very, very good.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and then do you have comments about what's happening in Toronto Centre with Annamie Paul?
I can comment on that. So I've campaigned for a few times in my spare time from my own campaign to go door knock with her. And I'll be honest, I cried on one of those days because I just can't fathom why it was such a challenge for her, because it really shouldn't be this difficult. She is so well-spoken, and I know no one deserves a seat in Parliament. No one deserves one. You have to earn votes, but I truly think she does deserve one. She is so intelligent. She is so well-spoken, and I'm heartbroken to see that she's not polling so well, but I think it's not really about her political future at this point. It's about political history. She did make history by just being who she is, by being the first Black Jewish major party leader in Canada. So I'm proud of her nonetheless, and we'll just see where the party leads us in the next few years, because looks like we're staying strong with 3 seats, and we've had 3 seats last election. So the Liberals are likely to lose some seats, but at least the Greens are retaining our strength.
Cool. That's terrific. Any more comments or questions? No? Okay, Rand, thank you very much. We greatly appreciate your time, and we honor your energy and your exuberance in choosing to run, and we wish you all the best going forward.
Thank you so much, folks. It was a pleasure chatting.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Have a great evening.
Care. Good night. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Enjoy. All right. I think we're blessed, especially in our 2 coverage ridings, with the number of young, very enthusiastic, energetic, articulate candidates that we've had an opportunity to speak with tonight. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. And again, we talked about it earlier, the young people are stepping up to the challenge, right? They are our future. They are right now, right? They're taking the lead and making things happen, letting their voices heard. So I think we're seeing great things to come. And as we heard from Rand, the energy, the passion that he brought to the conversation tonight, I'm inspired, right? Noor as well, the energy and the passion for our young people. I think they will also inspire a generation of young leaders to follow in their footprints. So
wouldn't that be incredibly fantastic?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, absolutely, and especially on climate, we're going to need them to get involved, speak up, and these are. If we're not moving to meet our Paris climate commitments, they're the generation who's going to be hurt more than ours will. So to see that change, we need them to get involved to demand change.
So that part's exciting, eh? Mm-hmm. And let's hope that there's a trend, being established, and that as the years go on, it's going to be continued. I know with the provincial Liberals that Stephen Del Duca had a target of having 30 candidates out of, I think it's 128, under the age of 30. And that was a very bold commitment to do. And I know that there's a number of provincial Liberal candidates that are under the age of 30. And wouldn't it be great if some of the other parties would establish somewhat similar, targets, for young people and for diversity?
Absolutely. I think it would be fantastic to see something like that, and not even so much at from the party level, but even going further down at the municipal level.
Exactly.
Right, because that's where you start to build those leadership skills, around politics and engagement and interacting with your community. So it would be fantastic to have some of those numbers represented.
I forget whether it was the Star or CBC profiled a young person from each of the federal parties, and the Liberal young person was from this riding, 14-year-old young Liberal, and Aislinn, I forget her last name, but Aislinn was her first name, and she was out there knocking on doors all the time with Lisa Post. And she was just incredibly excited about having the opportunity to do that. Really, really terrific. And they profiled a young person from each of the parties. We just happened to have one from our particular riding, so that was really cool.
Wow.
I'm just noticing, just to step in, Bruce, at Wellington, Halton Hills, they've called it for Michael.
Yeah.
And that the PPC has pulled ahead of the Green in that riding as well as in Dufferin-Caledon. So.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, which is kind of frustrating.
Yeah, and shall we go there now?
Okay, go for it, Cheryl.
Because I'd really like to talk about what happened in Bolton when the Prime Minister came to do a Liberal event that had to be cancelled because I watched, I think for 2 days, I watched videos from the various people that were part of the mob. I'm not even going to call it a crowd, and it disturbed me to the core. The level of I've never seen anything like that in my entire life at any kind of political event. The level of anger and
vitriol and
I talked about it earlier that we know the pandemic has been really hard on people and hard on mental health, but we have the pandemic of social media being abused and used for spreading misinformation and disinformation on the pandemic and the safety of vaccines. And obviously my organization, I represent 3,000 respiratory health professionals across the country. My members I speak to every day. They're burnt out, they're tired, and now they have protesters showing up at their workplaces. Every single day they say to me, Cheryl, the people don't understand how hard it is to look after patients with COVID. It's physically hard work, and now the huge majority of people in the ICUs are people who are not vaccinated. And that's because there's a crisis of disinformation being put out on social media. For me, what I find most offensive, and that's why I didn't have a question for the PPC candidate, is that politicians chose to take advantage of people. And I truly believe that people are making, these are fear-based decisions, and because they have a lack of education and information from reliable sources. But there are politicians now in the PPC party that are willing to take advantage of this fear and this crisis that is going on now for personal gain and to get votes. And that's what I saw. Small children that were there with their parents swearing at the Prime Minister and flipping him off in Bolton. They had professional signs made
So
that the PPC candidate.
So you shared with me a few days ago that those Trudeau signs were actually available on Amazon for $25 a piece.
Wow.
Yeah, and I thought that these were expensively produced, hundreds of dollars each, because typically if you do a banner of that size, that's the kind of, I would think, price you're looking at, but Amazon was selling them. And to me, that's particularly offensive.
There should have been a ban on that. Like, I don't think Amazon should be, selling products like that, especially when you're inciting hate.
Yeah.
Right. And to touch on some of the points that you were talking about earlier, leaders are entrusted with certain powers, right? And you're there to lead by example. And you can have your own opinion, but when you have individuals who are looking to you for that guidance and support, it is your responsibility to provide them with factual information. So when you're providing disinformation out there to the public, it's heartbreaking, and it further disenfranchised the community. It further marginalized individuals in the community, because now you have some individuals who are getting accurate information, others who are getting the wrong information, and that creates that divide in society, which further adds to the burden. So leaders are entrusted, with certain rights and power and privilege, and I think they should be using it in the right manner.
Exactly. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, so we saw what happened in Alberta when Jason Kenney declared the pandemic was over. We can't be afraid.
Beginning of July.
Yeah, we can't be afraid of COVID forever. And we saw what happened. The ICUs are way over capacity. Yeah. I spoke to some of my educators working in Alberta at Alberta Health Services. The tobacco reduction team, the smoking cessation team, all got redeployed into COVID-related duties today. They're looking at potentially implementing a triage protocol in Alberta this week. That's how bad it is. They've transferred patients wherever they're able to, and politicians at this point in time who don't take this public health crisis seriously are willing to take advantage of people's fear, because that's where this is all coming out of, a place of fear and misunderstanding.
Absolutely.
But when there's a deliberate campaign to put doubt into people's minds, it's heinous. And when I saw young children standing beside their parents screaming F Trudeau, and 6-7-year-olds with hate on their faces.
Yeah, they're picking that up from their
parents. Hate is taught.
Yeah.
And in all of that, I mean, the Brampton MPs were there, the Liberal MPs and their families were there. And at one point that crowd was also chanting, "Go home to your country, go home to your country." So that element of racism percolating under that is all mixed in together. It made me sad for our community. This is the community that I moved to when my son was a baby, that I chose to raise him in, and to see that level of anger and hatred. I felt shame and sad and frightened for the future. So when I see our PPC candidate polling ahead of someone as amazing as Jenny, You know, it's disturbing, and we need to watch this very carefully.
Yeah, I totally agree. And then just to kind of lighten things up again, when we open, because we're getting
nice segue.
We're getting a little into the heavy side here. The party results. Right now, they're projecting 156 Liberal seats and 122 Conservative seats. Is basically bang on to what the pollsters were saying, earlier today and for the last couple of days. And this might be one of the few elections where the pollsters were extremely accurate compared to some of the previous elections. And the BQ, I believe, is down a bit, and the NDP is up slightly at the moment. And the Greens are leading in 2 ridings. So it sounds like Kitchener Centre's one of them, and Elizabeth May's riding out on Vancouver Island would be the other one.
Which means Paul Manley will lose his seat. Yeah.
Well, if my memory is correct, the projections for Paul Manley's riding were that the NDP was going to take.
It was close, though. It was close. I mean, I know they were still optimistic there, but
it's still early in the evening. But
you see the Conservatives have pulled ahead in the popular vote right now.
And they had an edge in the popular vote in the 2019 election, but they had such a heavily concentrated vote in Alberta and Saskatchewan that it kind of diluted the votes in other parts of the country. So, we're essentially seeing the status quo.
So, at the end of the day, all this money that we spent for this election, and we end up in the same place. Where do the Liberals go from here?
You know what? That's a really good question. And I think they're going to have to just continue governing the way they were, and they're going to have to reach out for the most part, for NDP support on most of their initiatives, and the odd time probably the Bloc will support them like they did the odd time in the previous Parliament, and the Conservatives will do what their job is as Her Majesty's loyal opposition, and that is to oppose.
So when you look at so the PPC with the 5.2%, I mean, does this give Prime Minister Trudeau enough of a mandate to stay firm on, vaccine mandates and other public health measures? Because we still have a long ways to get out of this pandemic.
So I want to say yes, and I want to be really hopeful that they're going to be extremely tough on it. What do you think?
I think they will be tough on it, but I think there needs to be a lot more information around the vaccine mandates again, because there is a large portion of the population that are unvaccinated and are hesitant to get the vaccine, and that needs to be addressed. So until those concerns are addressed for those specific individuals, it's going to be a hard sell for the Prime Minister to continue to push hard on the vaccine mandate.
And the higher the percentage of people vaccinated, the harder it is to convince the remaining, minority that it's a good idea. And as you mentioned earlier in the evening, the vaccine hesitation amongst some of the visible minority groups is very real.
Absolutely.
And they've got to, and obviously the government has to do, in public health, a much better job.
Yeah, and Wellington Dufferin, Guelph Public Health has done an amazing job with their vaccine campaign and getting the information out there and making sure that, there's active campaigns, targeting hesitancy. But there is still a significant amount of work that still needs to be done, specifically with the Black community, right? And, I'll point out, for example, historically with the Tuskegee incident, right?
The airmen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that is a huge concern, and that weighs heavily on the Black population. There's also the Henrietta Lacks incident where, her cells were used for cancer, and there wasn't formal request or consent from the families. And so that again, goes into some of the hesitancy and the mistrust with or health officials and with the new vaccines. The other concern, again, is from a timing perspective, right? There's a fear that there hasn't been enough time for the vaccine to run its course to understand the long-term impacts. So until we're able to come in and address these issues head on, it will be an uphill battle. The other factor that we haven't really talked about around the vaccine is the number of individuals who perhaps may want to get vaccinated, but from an economic perspective, it's physically impossible, right? And so they're putting themselves at higher risk, whether they're having to commute to go to work by public transit, or they're frontline workers. And so, they're twice as likely to be impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. So there's a lot of issues that needs to be addressed still, and it's going to take some serious campaigning and critical information to be able to change the course.
Exactly.
Yeah, and a lot of these are, I mean, this is where, hopefully the federal government will work more closely with the provincial governments because healthcare is managed at the provincial level, sometimes municipally. I'd like to just say there's a difference between, those that are vaccine hesitant, that perhaps we can, work with them, provide them with more information. I'm going to tell everybody, contact the Canadian Network for Respiratory Care. We'll put you in touch with a certified respiratory educator who can provide you with all the information that you need to know about vaccines. But then we have the vaccine refusal, and that's the group I was talking about that were in there in Bolton, where it is, there's a sense of community that has happened in that group, started anti-lockdown, anti-max, anti-vaccine, and whatever other negative pieces that are percolating under there, and that we shouldn't ignore that as a fringe group, because we saw what happened and how that grew in the US with Trump, and we've seen that happen in the past. That this is something very dangerous that's happening within that community, and that we need to do everything we can to be mindful of it and to not give that hate a platform. Because to be very clear, what was going on that I witnessed in Bolton, what we've seen in front of hospitals is hate-filled. It's not just, I don't know enough about this vaccine and I'm concerned and I, don't feel ready to take it. Yeah. It is a whole different level. And when you're teaching children to hate, and that is...
Children don't hate.
Yeah, but that's it. If you look in the video and see the faces, the rage, the irrational rage in the children's faces, it hurt me inside.
Very scary in terms of the future,
to
right?
see children behaving that way and being taught to hate like that. So that we have to be really mindful, and it concerns me when we give a platform to someone like that, like the Dufferin-Caledon candidate that I didn't have a question for.
So we're going to change the subject, because I think we've talked about this a lot. Chantel Herbert from the Toronto Star had an article yesterday or today about what happens to either of the two major party leaders when one of them loses. And so at the moment, based on the projections, it looks like the Liberals will form a minority government and the Conservatives under Aaron O'Toole will fall short again. What do you guys think in terms of what is the party going to do to Aaron? Are they going to hang him out to dry, similar to what they did with Andrew Scheer, or do you think that they're going to give him another opportunity to, solidify his leadership and then plan for the future?
Well,
we'll let Alethea start on this.
I think, he did have, a fairly decent platform, so I think his party will give him another chance. I think after this term, I think that will be it for him. So I don't think he's finished yet.
Okay, and Cheryl?
Well, I think you saw today they were trying to reposition the Conservative insiders that a win was going to be holding the Trudeau government to a minority. And I think part of that would be Aaron O'Toole insiders wanting to position him to stay because we've seen what happens, and we saw what happened to Andrew Scheer, and certainly they went after him and held him accountable. So will we see that happen with O'Toole? We might. I mean, they've already been discussing potential leaders and waiting for the Conservative Party. Lots of speculation as to who that might be. I think he's going to have a heck of a fight to stay on as leader.
So what do you think about his more progressive, platform than the Conservatives normally have, and his coming out in favor of a carbon tax and indicating that he wouldn't cancel the billions of dollars that Trudeau promised to Quebec, that he would honor that? What do you feel about that, Alethea?
I think that's fairly safe of him. The fact that he's not canceling it for Quebec, again, it gives him something to hold on to. It's just safe. I don't think it's, his platform has been extraordinarily more progressive than previous campaigns. So we'll see.
Okay, Cheryl?
I think he's going to have a hard time keeping support of his caucus, because we know that many in his caucus are much further right than that, and him moving into the center to try to entice voters, I mean, that might have led to people slipping further right to go to the PPC. Did he really pick up any support? Doesn't look like it. So did that strategy work for him? Probably not, and probably did make some of his more right-leaning members of caucus not as happy.
Exactly. Okay, and
it'll be interesting to watch.
It always is. It always is. They have a propensity for eating their own, if you will. I don't know how else to put it. That's the only thing that came to mind. And the Liberals went through that with Stéphane Dion and with Michael Ignatieff a few years ago. So we're not strangers. The Liberal Party aren't strangers to this.
And the Liberals have themselves a problem once again, though, because I mean, you don't get rid of your leader when he is the prime minister. So once again, they've got Mr. Trudeau with a minority government, and a lot of people don't like him, and they may have voted Liberal despite having Justin Trudeau as the leader. So they have their own, problems to deal with, because you don't dump the prime minister.
That Jagmeet Singh is probably in the best position leader-wise, because he's growing his caucus to some degree, and he had a very aggressive campaign, and they raised enough money to be very competitive right across the country. So.
And I think to that point too, one of the interesting things about Jagmeet's platform is the number of young people that will be signing up for him, right? The number of young people that will actually vote for him again is very telling. And we saw the number of the young lady today, 22 years old, who ran for the NDP party. So I think he's definitely setting himself up to be in the prime position, to be a strong leader and to be potentially a contender in the next election.
Exactly. Good points. Good points. Okay, let's switch to attack ads. Okay, we've seen a ton of attack ads in this election. Jagmeet's very aggressively attacked Justin Trudeau. Some would say personally. Aaron O'Toole, right from the get-go, his attack ads have been quite personal against Trudeau. And then the Liberals over the last, week and a half have come out with attack ads against the Conservatives. So what's our feeling about what we've just gone through? Do you think they were effective? Do you think they swayed, votes? Do you think they actually work?
That's a really tough one. So for me, I found it very disappointing, the attack ads. I think it was very American style. So disappointing to see in the Canadian environment. One of the things that I noticed that with the attack ads, it took away from each party's platform. So for example, if we look at the NDP, right? there isn't much talk about what their platform is all about, because there was so much energy focused on the attack campaign that it distracted from their actual, platform. For the Conservative, again, it was similar tactics where you're taken away from what you're actually campaigning on by putting these attack odds out there. So it's.
So from your perspective, do you think that they were effective in terms of generating, more votes or electing more members, or did they miss an opportunity to more positively promote the platforms that they all spent, a huge amount of energy creating?
I think they definitely missed an opportunity. Mm-hmm. And there is no other way to expand on that than simply, they could have put their time and effort into focusing on their campaign. Everyone knows the tactics that, or the downfalls of each other's party. So, right, you didn't need to spend time and money to go on, to share with everyone that, this candidate is this or this party is this, because everyone knows it already. Everyone has seen it in the news somewhere, somehow. So their time and energy and money could have been better spent on their platform.
What do you think, Cheryl?
So I don't think that the attack ads meant a lot. I especially over the weekend. So here's what I think is really funny. The attack ads against the Liberals are always focused on Justin Trudeau, and I found it was just noise that I didn't want to listen to. So the Blue Jays are in a race to make the playoffs right now. So every commercial during the Blue Jays game, Justin Trudeau's face would be up there. And I wasn't really paying attention because after a while it just becomes noise. But over and over again, you're looking at a picture of Justin Trudeau, and often red in color. And I'd have to really, and even in my social media feed that comes in all the time, and I would often think they were Liberal ads, because a lot of, the way advertising works, it's just brand recognition. Yes. And you're putting, I'm sorry, this very handsome man's face out there over and over and again. Generally, when you do an attack ad, you try to get a picture of the leader not looking so good and attack him. I think all of the parties have had a hard time finding pictures where Justin Trudeau doesn't look good. And I think that has to backfire, because there'd be a picture of him looking, like he does, and you'd have to really, really pay attention to hear that, that's actually the Conservatives or the NDP attacking him for something. And some of the feed even used a red background. And I thought they were Liberal ads, and they were actually, conservative ads, well, which I thought that was very bizarre as someone with a marketing background.
You have to look really carefully.
Why are you branding it that way?
To see that it was authorized by
the Conservative
Party, because it was in small letters across the bottom of the screen, and there was no kind of conservative tagline,
Yes.
And I was reading an article a couple of days ago, and the headline was, O'Toole has a big Kenny, as in Jason Kenney, problem. Do you guys think that what's happening with Jason Kenney in Alberta has had a negative impact on Aaron O'Toole votes in the rest of the country?
Yeah, definitely, because he was so vocal with what is happening in Alberta, and for him it's almost like he has had to eat his own words at this stage, and that speaks to his leadership abilities, right? So people will definitely question that, and I think we're seeing the effects of that right now. So absolutely.
Cheryl?
So earlier in the election, O'Toole did make the grave mistake of saying Jason Kenney did a better job managing the pandemic than Justin Trudeau. So, and the media in the last few days have really pushed him hard.
And he wouldn't answer.
He wouldn't answer, and then didn't take media questions yesterday at all, obviously afraid of that. But, so what are we seeing tonight? How much did anything happen in the last week influence people's votes, or had they really made up their mind? But it does look like, we're sitting in around the 80% vaccination rate. The vast majority of Canadians are doing everything they can to get out of this pandemic. Do they want to turn the government over to someone who has said, we're going to go backwards? He's going to take away, he's not in favor of mandates. He's going to remove the requirement to have people fully vaccinated for air, train, and bus travel. these are steps backwards at a time when, and I'm sure they were not happy that Jason Kenney had to come out and say,
and especially just a few days before
I made
election
a mistake.
day.
Yeah. So did that. I mean, it hasn't drastically changed the results, but that might have been, the tipping point for the undecided voters that might have went, I don't personally like Justin Trudeau, but I want to get out of this pandemic and I'm going to vote Liberal. So
do you think that the Liberal attack ads to stop Aaron Trudeau and going backwards that the Liberals released starting, I think, about a week ago, do you think that they had an impact on them being able to hold on to seats that they might otherwise had softened to the point where they could lose? What do you think?
I think their messaging, I mean, I was surprised that they didn't go stronger on that messaging because earlier to say to stand firm, and we sort of saw that Bolton was the turning point for the Trudeau Liberals, and that it did seem to give them a wedge issue to talk about.
It stopped the slide.
Yeah,
basically.
it did. It was a turnaround.
Yeah.
But it didn't. I mean, it didn't miraculously change things, but it did seem to change the tone of the conversation.
Don't you guys find it interesting that no matter how much planning the various parties put into putting together their campaign strategies, that something always comes up? So it was either the day or the day after the writ was issued, Afghanistan happened, and then Bolton happened a little while after that, and it changes the whole dynamics. Don't you think?
Yeah, it definitely does, and it again speaks to how dynamic each party is, and especially in this case, the Liberal Party, how dynamic they're able to go about adapting to change and addressing some of these pressing issues that are happening in mainstream media and impacting families, impacting lives. The fact that we didn't hear any negative comment coming out of the Liberal Party when Bolton happened, I think is very telling, right? Because they were able to continue on their campaign and press on with the issues that was important to them, the issues that were impacting families. So I think that was significant to watch and unfold in the media.
So just seeing on the screen, 140 out of 240 Wellington, Halton Hills, and Michael Chong has a 2-to-1 advantage, which I think is fairly representative of his results over the last few elections.
And it looks like they've declared the 2 Green ridings now.
Okay, so one of them has to be Elizabeth May, and we're just going to have to be patient before we figure out whether it's Paul Manley or Mike Maurice.
Yeah.
Well,
someone must know. Text us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And
that's got to be 2 to 1.
And Kyle now has roughly a 2-to-1 advantage.
So that's got to be the Liberals losing support in Dufferin-Caledon, isn't it?
I believe
Bruce?
so. Yeah. Let me. So talk some more about that, please, and I'll just look up the previous results.
And I'm still seeing 1461 for the PPC, so that's not pulling that many votes away from the Conservatives. So here's my feeling about the PPC vote, because everyone kept talking about it pulling from the Conservative Party. I don't think that's where that vote is coming from. I think that's a lot of disenfranchised people who may not have voted ever before. And I know when I voted in my poll in Palgrave at the Equestrian Centre, the man in front of us had to very loudly inform everybody there that he was an American who had lived here since 1978, and he had got his Canadian citizenship just so that he could vote, because this election was so important to him. So he'd lived here since 1978 and finally became a Canadian citizen just so that he could vote. Now, I'm pretty sure he didn't do that to vote to support the Liberals or the Conservative Party, and that's who I think that would be. A lot of the people voting for PPC are those people who may not vote regularly in elections, but they're so angry and feeling so disenfranchised from society. And unfortunately, as I said, there's a party willing to, feed into those fears and make them, create that sense of belonging for them. Are they really pulling the traditional conservative vote? Maybe a little, but that's, I think if you deep dive into who that is,
So
I don't think that's who they
It's a
are.
lot of people who
maybe haven't voted
don't
before,
vote and have been motivated enough. And so going back to your question about the vote in the 2019 election, Kyle beat Michelle Fisher by around 6,000 votes, and the spread is wider right now between Kyle and Lisa. So, not the best result.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to do an analysis of the polls and see what's happening. So I think, Bolton, I'll be interested to see what happens in Bolton, because Bolton has obviously the site of what happened, though there were many people from outside the community that were at that Trudeau rally. It certainly wasn't. But from the beginning of the pandemic, every weekend in the Four Corners at Highway 50 and King, there have been demonstrations. So there definitely is a community there that is very upset with the lockdowns and the mask mandates, and now with vaccines. So that traditional Liberal vote that used to be in Bolton, Bolton demographic is changing as well.
And we'll do the deep dive.
And it'll be interesting to see.
Do you think that anger is going to carry forth in the upcoming provincial election next June, and that the governing party in Ontario is going to feel some wrath, that the way that that Trudeau and the Liberals faced this time? I'm wondering out loud.
I know. I feel it's an interesting question, Bruce, because you and I have talked about it, because what I saw in Bolton, the most rage, and I see that even when as I was driving through some of the rural side roads where the PPC signs are, and they're like, they want their freedom back, stop the lockdowns, and that was the, some of the comments at the, I don't want to, I can't hear you, you're wearing a diaper on your face, like from the but they don't even understand that these are not federal mandates. They're provincial, and sometimes because we actually don't have a provincial mask mandate. They're done at the municipal level. It's the municipalities that do the mask mandates.
What do you think?
So do they even understand?
Do you think that this anger and disillusionment is going to carry over into the next provincial election?
It will definitely carry over. Will it make a difference and change the leadership? I don't think it will.
Okay.
I think we'll see more of the same. And, the leadership from the provincial perspective, they've had to change their course right throughout this pandemic. And so I think they've learned some lessons, and I think it'll definitely favor them when it comes to election again.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up now, and so just to recap, Michael Chong has been declared the leader in Wellington Halton Hills,
the MP,
as MP, and Kyle Seaback has been declared the projected winner in Dufferin-Caledon, staying on as MP, and in the country. The Liberals have hung on to a minority government. So we thank you very much for watching, and what I'd like to do is to thank my panel, Cheryl Connors, Alethea O'Hara-Stevenson, and in the back room we've got Ian Wart, who's been making the phone calls to set up our interviews, and then Eric Froten is the technical producer, and Todd Collison is the person that runs the Rogers TV station in Orangeville. So good night, everybody. Thank you very much for watching us tonight, and hopefully you found our conversations or debates, interesting, and our viewpoints interesting as well. So thank you very much for being part of Rogers TV election night coverage. Thanks.
Thank
good
you.
night.
Have a good night.
Thank you. So why did Lisa not call?